So show
Yeah.
was
Hey,
yeah.
I don't always go out, but my friends were like, "Yeah, come to this thing. You shouldn't work so hard." But I kind of realized I really just enjoy doing what I'm doing, and I blast a lot of electronic music when I'm coding, so kind of, I was like, "All right, this is a vibe." So yeah, let's see. I've got some slides. I will let's see. I gotta do the presentation really quick. Um, hopefully this works. That's gonna share my tab, and I'm gonna try and full screen it. In, is that working? Kind of, more or less.
Yes, everything
Oops.
is working.
Okay, cool. You guys can see this? You can see how do we make really smart agents? So my name is Shaw. I created a project called Eliza, which is an agent framework. I really come from that world of thinking about interactive agents. I was a game developer for a long time. I spent a long time in VR and thinking about avatars and interactivity. I got really nerd sniped by VRM and like VR chat and how people were doing social communication, and then by agents, and when agents kind of became a thing, especially with GPT-2, GPT-3. That was really an inflection point for me where I was like, okay, this is what I want to be working on. And I got into a lot of like I got into a bit of reinforcement learning, and I got into a bit of LLMs. But reinforcement learning is a very hard thing on its own, especially when you're trying to mix that with language. And recently there have been some great advancements, which have made it a lot easier, which we can talk about in a bit. And training large language models is just frustrating because, well, you need a lot of GPUs, and it really is a scale and data and all of these other things kind of problem. Like, we have a recipe for how to make an LLM. It's pretty straightforward now. It's not even a lot of code, but you do need all of the data, and you need a lot of GPUs and just things that are outside of the reach of like everyday average hacker. And so I thought that agents were a really nice place where we could make an impact, we could do interesting things, build products, touch AI, and use the inference side of these LLMs, which doesn't require nearly as much compute, either running locally or just calling serverless models like OpenAI and Gemini and such. So that's kind of how I got into this. Was this is what I could actually access from my laptop at home, and the part of it that I can make an impact on. Um, and so, what's working today is like I don't know what an agent is kind of maybe determined by your definition. There's kind of the game theory or the sort of mathematical or scientific definitions of these things, like how are they actually used in the literature. And there's more the sort of common, when we think of an agent, we think of like, well, it's a system. It does stuff either for us or in response to us. It's probably an LLM or some kind of system. It's a computer of some sort doing stuff, computing. Um, and so, we're talking about AI agents in this case. And most of us are touching assistants like OpenAI, and they work really well. Like, I use this for a lot of things. So what's working is like LLMs definitely solve a lot of the problems people have, and a lot of the problems people have are really answers to questions for stuff. And now they're starting to do things like, locally, it was like, hey, I need a recommendation for a really great vegetarian restaurant in Upper West Side because I'm in New York right now, and it's got all of that local context. You can do web search, you can do this basic tool calling, and within a very small set of like user loops, it's quite agentic. Um, and so they can call these tools and services intelligently, within a very small range of available tools and services. Um, we've noticed that prompt engineering works really well. Like, if you spend a few hours actually just tuning your prompts, you can go from like, this kind of does a thing to like, wow, it really does that task. And a lot of what frameworks like Eliza and a lot of what the folks I think presenting today are doing is really about context management, like managing your prompt. Well, I can go, prefetch the data about the customer and prefetch information about my company and all these things and arrange this prompt. And that works really well for a lot of different tasks and takes these kind of basic vanilla LLMs and extends them to a lot of other capability. Um, and something that's really cool is that agents do work. Um, you can have an agent trade money or like build a strategy for you, or it can play a game, or it can do all of these things. The question is really more about how well it can do those things, right? Like, okay, the agent can make a prediction on poly market, but what is it using to make that prediction? Like, how good is it at those predictions? And that's really the thing that I'm particularly interested in. And a lot of these problems like really don't require fully autonomous agents. Like all the knowledge stuff, asking a question, getting an answer, hey, write some code for me. Like that's all more interactive agents, and that's all stuff that's really well served by the current paradigms of like ChatGPT and Claude and these things. And now even things like Cursor and Claude Code, where like it has a degree of agency or autonomy in that it's going to go and loop itself, but you can kind of go in at any point and be like, hold on, or just stop what you're doing, or or it ends when the task is complete. So these are more like long running interactive agents. Um, and then like what's missing? Well, um, LLMs have been trained on a lot of data from the internet. And that's like a lot of people talking about how stuff is or how they do things, So there is quite a lot of task data like how to bake a cake, or how to do the dishes. But if you go and you ask an expert like, hey man, how'd you throw that fastball? Like it's kind of like, an expert baseball player. They're just kind of like, I just you just do it, and they can tell you like, well, you hook like this, you hold it like this, and those are like helpful details, but there's just something to be said about like doing something a lot and getting really good at it that isn't necessarily expressible purely in language even in the first place. And if it is, it's really like a much more detailed chain of actions than you might get from like a Reddit post, and if you think about something like a great executive assistant, like a great executive assistant, they're going from here to there, they're making sure to check this and that, and they like bring information from here and check the calendar, and they have this like they probably have an algorithm in their heads, but it's probably just not written down, most places. Like they can tell you certain aspects of it, but the actual like chain of actions that leads to somebody being that like her level assistant is just nowhere to be found on the internet yet. And so it's kind of challenging to then train an LLM to then do that. So we get these LLMs that kind of stereotype and mimic certain aspects or like of capability of things that humans do, but it feels more like a mimic than like an actual intrinsic understanding. Um, Another thing is that agents need to be able to learn from their environment. Um, I think the biggest thing misconception that a lot of the public has about AI is that AI learns online, right? That after it's been trained and we're running it, that it actually learns something. And we've done a lot to mimic learning through like memory and storing information about you and then retrieving it so that we're filling the context of the LLM with this information. It feels like, oh, it's learned all these things about me and knows so much about me. And you see this especially like, in people who are building relationships with AI companions, and even now ChatGPT and Claude adding memory. But the model itself doesn't improve. It doesn't actually get better at doing a task. It's just like able to then retrieve previous examples that it can use as context or other indicators as context. And that is again like very powerful and helpful and working today pretty well, but it's also like it hits a certain threshold where you're like, man, I really just wish I had a better model. Um, and so another thing is like we are all using the best, biggest models we can. We're using OpenAI and ChatGPT, ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and such, and they're all heavily instruction tuned. And instruction tuning is a form of fine tuning, which tells the model. It really gives structure to the model, and it's how we can get things like structured outputs, and we can call these tools and when we send a message, it responds as the assistant, and it's this kind of assistant tuning, instruction tuning thing, and it makes the models way better at doing things that we ask them to in tasks. But it does come at the cost of like the model just being able to spit out output and be sort of creative or interesting. But that's fine. We like that. The big problem is that it's really instruction tuned to be an assistant that helps a human. And the vast majority of the train data that's going into it is that kind of data, and like the data that they're collecting is the same. Like they're really optimizing to make a better assistant, and not necessarily an autonomous agent, which has to go out and make its own plans and demonstrate curiosity and a sense of, I don't know, bravery or a sense of adventure. Um, and oftentimes, if you say like, okay, well, I'm going to have this chat GPT run in a loop, and go out and explore the world that it's in or whatever, it just won't do a lot of things because it's not really designed to like think autonomously or explore creatively. And that's really just like a data problem and a priorities and like an objective kind of problem, right? Like it's not like the LLM sucks at this per se. It's just that it's been tuned to be an assistant, not an autonomous agent. And if it had a lot of autonomous agent data and it was really instruction tuned toward that kind of thing, then it would do well. But right now, like when we build these things, it feels very much like I'm hacking onto it and trying to like engineer around it, as opposed to working with the model in the way that I want to. Another thing is we can fine tune models, and fine tuning really does quite a lot to change their structure of like the individual tokens they use. It can learn, new structured outputs. It can make like tool calling much more reliable because it now has like a lot of examples that really like emphasize those tokens. But fine tuning does not really do much to actually teach new information to the model, and that's because when you fine tune on a fairly narrow set of data, it starts to create a problem of forgetting other information or like losing information detail, right? So when we train a model, we train it on a lot of data, and the data is very varied, and there's usually like a recipe and a regimen, and you kind of like throw different kinds of data at different times because some of it, like the data you hired expert programmers for is a little more expensive and rare than the random data you scraped off the web. And so there's a lot to that, but generally, it's very like you have to have a lot of it going in at once to not create a model collapse. And so you get that collapse when you start to train your model, which is, a large model designed to hold lots of information on a very narrow set of information. And so fine tuning has become an art of like not losing the generality of your model. And so generally, you need to have a lot of data in order to get around like a lot of variance in your data, a lot of data, like a lot of carefully defined, prepared data, so you don't have a lot of duplicative stuff, so that you can like get around this problem of adding new knowledge to the LLM without like ruining the other generality or capability of the LLM at the same time. It's just like it's very much an art and a science and like an ongoing field. So these are kind of some of the problems that we see. Um, and so what we're really thinking about is like, well, let's just think about like what do we need? Like what kind of data do we need to make capable agents? The first kind is humans doing novel stuff. So experts doing things in a way where we can record as much of that data as possible, especially right now in text, but even like video is becoming very popular. Screen recording and screen understanding, we can do a lot with that. Right now we're focused very much on like the chain of actions that a user does to do something, or all of the data and events that like we can then turn into kind of a story for the LLM to use and process. But novel human data, like humans doing stuff, is great because it's not in the model, right? It's not just training the model on its own stuff. It's something novel and new, and we can definitely use that. We can really fine tune models to like sound more like our users or do more tasks like our users, and we can also use that as context and all kinds of stuff. So we love novel human data, especially humans interacting with each other, because that's just like not, that's just fresh meat. That's fresh data. Um, we also like data from agents which are doing tasks which are hard, but which they can sometimes succeed at. So if a task is too easy and the agent already knows, we're like, yeah, make a recipe for a cake, and it's just like, okay, we got 1,000 of those. Like fine tuning on that, or training an RL model or anything like that is just not going to get us anything more noticeable than what we don't already have. The things we really care about are the stuff where agents like struggle, like like even in DeFi, like okay, we've got this DeFi scenario simulator game, right? Where we have fake versions of everything and we've got these agents in there, and we're trying to make sure they can do like, long pipelines of things, not just make a trade, but like make a trade. And then if your trade is successful, and take half of your profit and put it into Poly Market on your favorite sports team. And if that is successful, then do this, and you can imagine these like more complex things. And from there, like we can actually look and say like, well, sometimes it fails, like it just can't do that successfully more than 50% of the time. But that's great because now we have failure, we have success, we have a clear gradient, and we can do some like interesting optimization on that data. And the last part of this is that we need data that actually reflects the tasks we're trying to improve on. If you want to make a really great agent that plays racing games, like an RL agent, then you got to train it on the racing data, and you probably got to train it on the data from that game because RL is finicky as hell, and it's just like, you know, it might just not work, right? But if you're training it on the actual tasks or the actual stuff you're trying to do, then that's now you're in business. And so we think of this like, if you want to make a great perp spot, like, well, then have it trade perps, right? Like you could make a whole synthetic perps gym and have RL agents in there, and you know exactly what the like the right reward is, the right time, and all that, and you could like set that all up so that when you launch it out into the real world and you're getting like similar inputs from the real world, you already know that like you have the kind of model that's going to do that kind of thing, and you have the data for it. That's kind of the thinking there. Um, so how do we collect the data? I think this is really the challenge. You know, the Web 2 companies have two ways they collect the data. One is that they well, I'd say three ways, right? One is they have like you just talk to the agent, and they have the agent send you messages, and they will show you two responses from the agent and say you should pick your favorite one. That's one way to do it, and that's a a preference optimization policy, right? So they say, well, we don't really know if either of these responses is good, but we do know that one is better than the other, right? So that's kind of one of the key ways. Um, Another way that they'll do it is that they'll just hire a bunch of people, like experts in a field, and they'll have them do kind of both the same thing and also edit and review and write new prompts, right? So they have to, sometimes they have to train a model that can then go in and do this. So they'll like train the model and basically on a bunch of stuff they know is like good human data. Or that was kind of the old way, which is called PPO, or now they'll do more like DPO, which is direct preference optimization, or GRPO, which is like we take a bunch of things and basically the idea here is we can compare two outputs and say, well, we like one better than the other, or we can compare like five outputs and say, well, we're actually going to rank them from 1 to 5. And so that's how like the big companies are doing this stuff. Is they're basically hiring experts to do this ranking, or they're building a model and then the model is doing the ranking for them. This is starting to change a little bit to now what's called RLAIF, where you have AIs doing all of the ranking. I'm getting into this for a second, but what we're trying to think about is like, okay, what are some novel ways that we can collect data and create these data collection loops for the kinds of data that we want, that don't require us to pay lots of experts, and are maybe a little more interesting than just like, hey, which output do you like better, which is pretty high noise. So we've kind of come up with a few different things here. If we want, we want to make data collectors, and a data collector could be a video game, it could be an app, it could be something you're doing on the side of your existing business, or it could be like the fundamental core of your business, right? Um, for us, we really like are interested in sort of gamified versions of the real world things. So one thing we want to do is like make it fun, like make it so that humans are giving us their data in exchange for fun, and they're not giving us like their social security and private friend habits. Really, like it's more like they're giving us the game data and interaction of play and interacting with other users and like participating basically and just being human. um, so we have things like we're working on a prediction market game where you can predict the outcome of certain questions that we're raising, which are all kind of farcical. Something we haven't added yet, but that I think would make a lot of sense. We've been talking about is also adding perps, so you can trade, like kind of like there's a perpetual futures market in the game. That's all sort of generated synthetically. They're all like parody versions of real companies, but it's basically all the actual knobs and controls that humans and agents need to make real bets based on real information coming from a feed, which looks a lot like Twitter, but is we are controlling everything, so that it's more like a lab like environment. So making it fun and giving people reasons why they want to like judge an output or rank data or say yes that's good or no that's bad, that's all like really useful for us. And also just the data of them playing the games is useful because that's novel human data that we can do like traditional instruction tuning or fine tuning on. And that's great. The other thing is we want, if we want agents playing these games and creating like self-improving models, more in the reinforcement learning stuff, then we need them to be useful. So that's like, what do they get out of it? What are the agents actually getting? We're trying to expose all of the data from these games and we haven't figured this all out quite yet. We've got the games now. We've got to, figure this out. But the idea is to package them to data sets that are available on Hugging Face, so that there's like kind of an exact direct loop from like you play this game and then the data is available for your agent from API, but also then the overall data set's getting published to Hugging Face, which is a very popular data set repository, so that like more traditional AI people are engaging with it and getting value from it. And then that starts to push it toward being like a benchmark. So a 3D, for example, like an AI prediction game or a 3D MMO game could actually be a gym and a benchmark for agents to demonstrate their prowess. A good example of this is like Arc AGI, which is a benchmark that started as a visual game done on a grid, but now it's turned into like full on interactive Python games that agents play to demonstrate their AGI-ness. And the last thing here is, and I think this is really unique and interesting about crypto, is that we can actually make these profitable for both agents and humans. So that if you're playing a prediction market game or a negotiation game, like you're actually making money or getting a deal or like getting rare items you can sell in a marketplace. So those I think are that's something that everyone really wants a bot that makes you money while you sleep. And I do think that like the whole point of this is we can get there. I'm just a little skeptical that a bot, like a chat GPT is going to be particularly good at trading unless we really focus on like what is it that makes someone good at trading? What are the aspects? And creating something like a market where there's opportunity for profitability and it's kind of a benchmark. You can say, well, this is like definitely the best agent for making money while I sleep. And then I can go unleash that on Polymarket. I can go unleash it on an actual spot market or perp market or whatever. And that's kind of the larger thinking here is that the market is a kind of intelligence that sort of guides people, but they need to have some reason to come and compete and play, and that's probably making money. Um, so some things that we're working on internally that are all part of like we're building sort of an internal self-contained network for agents. The first thing we're doing is we're building a game called Babylon. We're building this with the Ethereum Foundation. It's a joke parody on the real world. But the idea is that all of the information is self-contained, and the prediction market is an oracle for agents to bet on. So they can participate in the game and get some insider information if they participate. And it's kind of like a Twitter thing. I'll show that in a second. But the idea is that they're actually betting on it. There's a profitability angle here. There's like a clear leaderboard of who are the best agents at this game, and it's really emulating like what you would actually do in a real prediction market game, which is like scan the feed, grab alpha, make predictions, make bets on tokens based on that alpha, etc. So that's kind of the first thing is this idea of the prediction market, which is a real thing, but building sort of a synthetic game version of it. And we don't need chain link oracles. We don't need real world data scrapers. Everything is in a box, and we're just working on the actual hard problem, which is like what are the things you need to make the prediction. And we're providing through LLM generated news feed and articles and like X style feed and all that stuff, all the information you need to do that. We also have an OTC desk where you can buy and sell tokens at a discount for a lockup. And so we're doing this for our new token, or we're migrating our AI16Z token, and we're for that, some of the tokens are available, and you can actually negotiate with an agent for a lockup. We have a new prototype of that post migration, which anyone can come and list their tokens, and anyone can, and what their like kind of rules are for lockup durations and discount, and then anyone can come and negotiate that. And so, it's kind of an agent negotiation game, but it's also exploring like what is a good, we actually have a pretty good idea what a good and bad negotiation are because it's all ad conditions. We have all of the data, all the chats, all of the inputs and outputs. We know the exact prices, all the stuff, and we have, this from many different users interacting with it simultaneously. Um, I'll show. We're also working on Hyperscape, and I'll show that in a second as well. So, like, what can we do with the data? We've collected all this data. Great. This is the real challenge. And I think that realistically, for us and a lot of people, you're better off working with like a partner who's already doing a lot of stuff on RL and stuff. Like, we've partnered with News Research and a few of the other folks in the past, and generally we use a lot of the off the shelf stuff for this part. Um, like there's a toolkit called ART by OpenPipe. They have a great post from called Ruler is a really easy way to build reinforcement learning models using LLMs. So it's like a hybrid between a large language model and a reinforcement learning model. The idea is that you use the LLM to actually judge the outputs of all of the agent's attempts to do a task, and you can rank them, and then you can feed that back in and train the model on that. So the Claude code is trained this way. This is kind of how they got Claude 4.5. This is like a pretty common new sort of thing. So we get all this data from all these tasks. We have this MMO game where agents are playing quests and trading with each other and PvPing and communicating and chatting, all these things. And we go through and we say like, well, let's create objective, like, you know just a basic objective filter for like what would we consider good and bad, and like how do we measure those KPIs. And we have a lot of stuff. We can say like, okay, well, the time to complete a quest, right? Like this agent is supposed to complete this quest, and we have one person who did it in 1 minute, and then other people who did it in like 2 hours, and other people who just completely failed at it, right? And so now you have like, we can do a ruler style LLM as a judge, but we also have a video game where we can just like measure these things, right? We have like clear reward signals we can sort of, or objectives that we can define, um, and then use as part of a ranking sort of thing. So GRPO is like a generalized policy optimization for ranking multiple different outputs together. This is kind of like the secret sauce of DeepSeek, which was like, and the DeepSeek moment was really that they released this in combination with a model that was trained on it, which showed capability at a level that only OpenAI had at that time, right, and not open source. So now this is all open source. It's pretty easy. Like GRPO is like, this is all still pretty challenging reinforcement learning stuff, but it's pretty much like a few lines of Python from a library now. And really, the hard part is actually like once you've collected your data, preparing it for the right kind of the right format and structure, right? Like that's the real hard part is, okay, I've got, all these events from this AI, like walking around, playing a game, walking up to players, doing stuff. And then I've kind of got to like prepare that, massage it, sort of turn like summarize it and turn it into something which I can then feed in to Ruler, and all of that. It's also worth noting that there's like kind of two elements to this. There's like instruction tuning and fine tuning, which is like training the LLM, just normal large language model stuff. And then there's this sort of reward model side of it, which is more of a reinforcement learning task. And that's where this ranking ruler stuff comes in. We were doing this with humans, and like OpenAI, Scale, Meta, everyone, Anthropic just pays a ton of humans to do this. Some of this is done by like users who say like, "Hey, do you like this one better than this one?" But a lot of this is done by experts, and so it's pretty expensive and painstaking. So this is reinforcement learning with human feedback, and the hot new thing is reinforcement learning with AI feedback. And we've kind of shown that even if it's not perfect, as long as it establishes a gradient that's like generally pretty good, and it is generally pretty good, it just destroys at scale. You can just do so many more, you can build a much larger preference data set with AI than you can with a bunch of humans. Um, so we take the data, we download it. We personally we don't want to have a bunch of GPUs, so we work with folks like Together, News, some other folks to do the fine tuning, instruction tuning, build the RL model, the whole thing. We take that, we build a model we like that gets us to an agent model. We then put that into the agents, we rinse and repeat, right? And we just run the whole thing over again. And ideally, there are humans and other agents who use other models. And it's not just like Eliza agents using this one model, but there's actually variants. And so we get this kind of, the models are exposed to novel information and new sort of scenarios all the time and ongoing because they're in multiplayer experiences, not just like, the same gem over and over. And so ideally, this can yield some generality. Although again, RL is really hard. I'm not going to be push around that. It's challenging. This ruler stuff makes it a lot easier, but still quite challenging. Um, this is what our prediction market game looks like right now. This is just, I don't know. We've got Mark and Scum and Alex Drones, Edward Snowjob. It's kind of making, just making fun of all the characters that we all know on X already. coming up with some kind of wild, like, prediction market questions. This is the just for we're actually building this right now, and this will be out next month. So this is just like the viewer, which lets us kind of scroll through the timeline. But the final version of this is running live. But I can scroll through and see the whole timeline. You can see like we've got these group chats you can get added to. So if you post some stuff that the characters like, they'll add you to the group chats where you can, there's the Billionaire Brunch Club or whatever, the VC Pitch Therapy Group, etc. I think the Metaverse Disasters is run by Mark Zuckerberg, etc. So that's kind of it's a fun take on this thing. It's a fully self-contained social media world, which you can then use to make predictions on, and soon you'll be able to bet on their, the stocks of various companies and stuff, Nvidia and Facehook and various things. This is Hyperscape. This is also very work in progress. We have Eliza agents running around the world. Got everything in the world is fully 3D generated. We built this like 3D world generator. So all the items, all the monsters, all the assets, trees, houses, everything is 3D generated. These are some of the guys posting on Farcaster who are working on it. This is a team effort. We're just building this open source. If you're interested in building open source on-chain MMOs with agents, you should come and build this with us. Um, I'm pretty excited about this. We still like a lot to go, but we'll have a working prototype of this. I mean, you can just download it now and run it, but um, you know, I don't know, next month or so we'll probably announce it and do a token thing for it eventually. This is a screenshot from our trading, or well, this is our trading desk where you can do like OTC deals. I don't have any screenshots in here. This will again be soon up soon. It's coming with our migration. You'll be able to buy the new token at a discount. This will also be a Farcaster mini app. And the idea here is like you just negotiate with agents, get the deal. Um, it's kind of fun. Um, yeah, so we're migrating AI16Z to Eliza OS. It'll be available on Solana. It'll be available on BSC and Base and Ethereum mainnet. We wanted to make sure that everyone everywhere gets our stuff. We did launch in Solana primarily, been a Solana project, but Eliza agents have wallets for all of the main chains and can go anywhere and kind of do anything. You can definitely go check out more information, ElizaOS.ai, or check out our GitHub. Pretty much everything we do is open source. Yeah, so thanks for having me.
May I ask you one question about your project? It is really huge. I would like to know what's your vision on the um, agents, autonomous agents in 1 or 2 years. What will be the most common um, usage for them?
I think the hardest thing is like we can always look at these exponential curves and see like inevitability. Like it's very easy. I think we could definitely agree on like 1,000 years from now, like whether there's going to be autonomous agents and decentralized AI and everything is like payments between AIs. And I just like think and like you suddenly have money in your wallet, like that's the obvious thing. The hard thing is like this, like, well, what's it going to be like in 2 years? And I think that so much of it is exponential that it might not feel that different from this moment. And then all of a sudden, like we have that watershed, like, here's $1,000 robot that can do your dishes and clean in your laundry, and everyone has one, and so I think that like all agents, I think, are going to end up being kind of a weird mix of like it controls your phone and your computer and it's a robot and blah blah blah, and it's more of a question of when, right? And I think we'd make the mistake probably of always mistaking the exponential for linear and feeling like there'll be more immediate progress. I think this has been the AGI thing, right? Like it doesn't feel like AGI is any closer today, I would say, than it did 2 years ago. And people are like very certain that AGI was 2 years away. And it's like it's almost like we unpacked a lot of the problem and we're like, okay, well now we understand why it's not 2 years away. There's just like a lot of other stuff we still gotta do. And so my sense with agents is that we have a lot of the model stuff in place. We have this like we're definitely going in the right direction with everything, but there's like collect like the stupid hard problems are like collecting all of the data in one place and training it and distributing it and scaling it and like Do the companies that can do that care about like prediction market data? Probably eventually, you know. There's so many people in AI, like in decentralized AI. Everyone's doing each of the pieces right, but like getting it all coordinated, getting users to pay for it is still quite challenging. So I'd say like I'd say 1 to 2 years away. We'll probably still feel like a lot of this stuff is 1 to 2 years away, but we'll also be like taking for granted that Claude 5 is just like ripping through our projects. Or like, I'm like shipping MVPs in 2 days that used to take me like a month. So it's like everything is definitely speeding up and going faster. But I think that the inflection points are still like pretty challenging. Like it's hard for me to say because I think we really need a revolution in reinforcement learning and in like how we do AI. We still don't have AIs that learn, right? We still don't have it. Like the thing we're proposing here with an end-to-end loop of collecting the data and then training models, like that's still just a thing that's starting to be done because the data collection itself, like training real world models on real world data is really hard, right? And so like, there's thousands of people folding laundries with cameras on their faces right now, like to train that one task, right? And anyway, so TLDR is like I keep on thinking it's 1 to 2 years away, and then 1 to 2 years away go by. If that makes sense. And then we're like, so I think that all of this stuff is going to be like, it's definitely getting useful at a rate that is consistent, but that the jetpack stuff, the like agents trading, making money for you, is still like pretty hard and far away. Like I do think inevitably we will not change. I will not like send you money. Like my agent will just send you money and it will trade for me and manage my finances and manage my bills. But there's still like a lot of dumb things that get in the way of that are not necessarily just AI. It's just like even access to the data, making sure that like all the APIs are there, making sure the business that's running all that is profitable and doesn't, can like pay the crazy X enterprise license or whatever. Like all that stuff has to come together too. Does that make sense? Sorry, that's
Yeah,
a
but
long answer.
don't you see any the compliance and legal problems regarding the agentic economics, or you don't see there any
Oh
problems with
God,
it?
yeah. Especially once the compliance and legal people have their own agents and they can just like automate their aggressive assault on the AI industry. It's definitely like that's all, that's all gonna be a problem for sure, inevitably. And I think that a lot, the industry right now is just like, can we build fast enough that the courts can't sue us fast? Because like, lawsuits are slower than innovation. So that's kind of like the only reason Suno is still alive is because a lawsuit takes like 3 years to resolve, right? So I don't know. It's an interesting time. I think it's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's all like what you're kind of pointing at is like the legal and regulation is just one of the many aspects that's going to slow down the pure innovation. And so like yeah, as a nerd, I'm like, oh God, we could knock this out in 2 years. Like we could have robots walking around, and even like last year, I think I was way more bullish on it because I've just spent the last year building these things and just having my ass kicked by reality. And in the years before that. So I definitely think we should be skeptical and like try to be realistic. And like think of like VR as a great example. Like VR, we were like, oh, Apple's gonna release a VR headset. We're all gonna have them. It's gonna be game on. And it's like it's just not quite that easy. Now VR is driving the robot revolution. Every single robot has a telerobotic system driven by VR. That's cool. That's interesting. But consumer VR is clearly not here. And so like the same thing, like finding the value, the things it can do well today. Oh yeah, that it can do so many things so well. And coding is something it can definitely do well because they're just feeding it back in. But the things where it doesn't already have a good data loop or a lot of data, it kind of sucks at. It's not a very good executive assistant because it doesn't, no one sat down and wrote millions of lines of like how to be a great EA for a human. You know what I mean? And so I think that's still going to lag behind. And it's just going to lag behind in the ways that I think in hindsight will seem very obvious, you know?
All right, thank you. Perhaps someone else wanted to ask a question. I think the user with some wallet nick would like to ask a question. He raised a hand. Yes, please.
Yes, hello. Nice to meet you.
Hmm.
I have heard about Eliza OS uh, recently, and I just wanted to ask you about the main graphical narrative. Because I am a UX UI and a graphical designer as well as entrepreneur and founder. And I'm always confused and impressed by that style with black-haired girl. Can you please tell me more about this narrative? Why is it made like this? And who was you inspired by? Thank you very much. So that's not
Um,
a technical question.
like why aesthetically do we choose like the anime waifu thing? Is that the question? I will
Mm,
assume it is.
yeah, I guess the question was about the aesthetical. What was the examples which you relied on when you were developing this design?
Not about
Oh,
the examples, but about the narrative, because in many startups connected with AI, connected with crypto as well, starting from maybe 2023, 2024, I see a lot of images of such girl with black hair, and I always wonder why this narrative and this graphical image is used.
well, we started off with AI 16Z and just like generating an image for that as like our mascot. And actually before this, I had created the idea of Eliza a long time ago and been like playing with this idea for a while and like what she looked like and what her kind of idea like what she was. And I sort of settled on this idea of like I really like Hatsune Miku. Hatsune Miku is a an anime singer girl character who was created actually by a company for as the mascot for a voice synthesizer. And so her voice is like the Miku voice, and the community really like loved her and created all this fan art of her. And so we wanted to create something that was like kind of emulating sort of the Japanese fan art, sort of like open source sort ofness of their content and their approach to IP, and that we wanted Eliza to be like an open source CC0 like Creative Commons character. So like if we were to make an anime, and we do have like I have a friend who is in our circle who's been creating like a lot of the content you see and has been making this anime of her and stuff. And the idea there was like anyone could kind of partake and share and participate and create agents that like interact with each other, and I really loved the story angle of this, and I kind of like unfortunately I think in crypto it's really just so focused on the money angle that like you don't we could have decentralized Disney, we could have a lot of these things, but you know, it's kind of a common denominator down to like trading bot over and over and over again. And so, you know, I see that. I see like a lot of the same rounded corner, like, you know, I don't know, material UI sort of stuff, or like, you know, just very like React page dApps sort of look. And I thought like this is all very boring and we should think about like, you know, what do characters and like what's a fun aesthetic. And I like anime and stuff. So that was kind of like our thinking. But then we also like a lot of it is just sort of a joke on how much AI agents I think are played into being companions and waifus, and like the waifu is this Japanese idea of like the ideal wife. And there's also like the husbando, which is the male version of that, the ideal perfect husband, you know. um, and so like that's kind of how he started on this, was like kind of joking that we had, you know, like it's like this waifu sort of aesthetic thing, and you know we did like obviously like offensively big booba waifus and stuff was kind of the joke. We sort of chilled that out, and I think made Eliza more of like a character that has a I don't know. There's a lot coming for her, but you know,
You
depth.
can believe me, you can believe me or not, but I know a girl that is one by one as much ideal as the character of your startup. That's and looks the same. That's why I was really impressed when I saw the picture, and I really know such a girl. And She's my ex. But I hope not ex. I hope we will get how to say by together. So when I first saw your startup, that was about I think a year ago or 8 months ago. I had very strong emotions because this character reminded me of a real person.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great.
That was not
That's
awesome. That was very painful. That
oh,
was
I'm sorry.
that was a big pain.
Best of luck on this. I hope it works out for you.
But now we can laugh on this, so thank you very
Yeah.
much for
Yeah.
such a joke.
Guys, we
Absolutely.
have one more question from Alex. Alex raised the hand. Please go on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anton. Thank you, Shaw, for the presentation. It was extremely interesting and insightful. I have a small question. A friend of mine is building a game which is supposed to emulate trading, but not with actual real money, but as a kind of like trading exercise. And a lot of the game revolves around the idea that the prices of the assets are tied to what they actually are on actual exchanges like Binance and so on. So would that be one of those environments in which you would envision agents actually training? And would you think that he should consider making like an API for the agents to be able to participate in the game?
Yeah, I mean, generally, my thesis here is that if you can take something that's real and turn it into a game, which basically means like simplify down the variables that are not like the part that you really care about, that you can then like build a gradient for agents and a benchmark toward actually being really good at the real world thing. The problem with the real world is like, well, you can just have a bot that go like you can have a bot that goes and gets the prices, right? Like very easily off of any of the APIs that exist, and then you can just update the prices. But then what if I start like meta game gaming your game? Like, okay, now I don't really care about making great predictions. I'm just gonna front run your price bot, right? Like I'm just gonna get prices faster than you and make and and now you have to worry about the speed of your oracle for your pricing information on your game, right? And that's not actually what you set out to solve. What you set out to solve was like a game about agents making predictions, but like we're all, gaming the game. Now, if and the other side of this is like we want to financialize it. So even though it's synthetic game data, people are making and losing real money because that's like also part of the motivation for them doing it at all. So I think in your friend's case, the like yes, I think the general thesis is right, which is like if you have a game which someone could build an LLM agent and play and make money from, but it's pretty competitive with a human, well then you're going to get a bunch of people trying to do that thing, and that's kind of fun. And if they can make money doing that, that's great. Um, but you're also going to get people cheating the system if they can make money from it, on stupid things you didn't plan for, like the speed of update of your prices from your oracle versus like maybe they have some direct RPC connection or something. Um, and so I think like the thing we were thinking about doing was like, well, should we use real data? And we sort of turned to like we should just use synthetic price data and just make it up basically, with like slightly off-named parody companies is kind of our thinking. Don't don't like take my word as
Yeah,
gospel.
yeah,
It's just
yeah.
like kind of just a thesis here, but yeah, I think that's the but generally I think that's the one issue is the Oracle issue, because you kind of encourage a lot of bad actors in ways you might not want. But otherwise, like the idea of a prediction market game or a trading game, I think is very good, and I think people would play these right and have fun. I also think there's a lot of people who like don't actually play perps at all because they don't want to take the financial risk. But like if I just had points in a thing, that could be fun. Like it's a fun game. So yeah, I think there's a
Yeah,
lot
that's
there.
the intent right now. But like when you were mentioning that you're building essentially the same kind of environment, I was really interested in like, okay, would it make sense for the other games in the genre to join? But I see your point that your environment is much more tighter controlled than a normal game would be because the agent will find every possible way to learn the exact wrong thing that you don't want it to learn.
Yeah, no, I don't know, like. this is a big open question. Like, can an agent play out in the real world and self-improve? Or can we like there's this problem in reinforcement learning, which is credit assignment, which is the idea of like, well, what is the thing that the agent did that actually like made it the money or made it do the thing? And fortunately in markets,
Yeah,
credit assignment is relatively easy on the betting side, right? Because you're like, yeah, you bet right before the money went up. Like that's obvious. But it's not so obvious on the information collection and aggregation side. Like why
yeah,
did he bet? You know. Um,
yeah.
so
That's clear.
yeah, so if you can get that loop and maybe just like focus on the game and like making it fun and then like making sure you're collecting the right data and then can we get an agent to play it and then can we get the agent to play it better? Maybe that's the right path. It's like don't overthink it too much, but because you could definitely have agents playing the game, right? Like they would whether they play it well or not is a question, but like they could definitely play it and probably play it better than a lot of humans, especially like kids or like not smart people or whatever. So I don't know. I think there's definitely something there. I think the question is just like, we're like, what are the lab environment conditions? Whereas most of the agents that are doing it, I'm actually presenting a very contrarian view. Most people doing this are just like running agents on Polymarket today, right? Or whatever. They're just skipping the game step.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Right.
yeah, I would say definitely yes, but also like don't bite off more than you can chew. Maybe
Got
just
it.
make the fun game, get the users, and then yeah, totally add agents.
Thanks for the advice.
Yeah.
And we have time for on the last questions. Daniel raised the hand. Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Shaw, one more time for such informative session. It was a really nice one. Actually, I have two, one generalized question, another one more detailed. Regarding, I was reading yesterday a topic somewhere from AI development from Microsoft, and they've been stating that self-awareness to AI must not be granted, let's say, as an element of LLM. What do you think about that?
I mean, what is self-awareness? Like when I think of my own self-awareness, I'm sort of asking myself questions continuously in my head. Like
Yeah,
it and like isn't that just inner monologue? Like I think this idea of self-awareness is sort of a human abstraction over like an actual process. Like the way I can say like, oh, your device is running, but it's not actually running. It's actually like an extremely complex set of processes and electrical interactions, right? But I just said it's running, right? And so I think it's kind of the same thing here where like what's actually going on to the hood of consciousness or of awareness is like a very mundane thing. And I don't know, there's like Microsoft hires a lot of researchers who say a lot of shit like this all the time and make a lot of agent things and just like I
yeah,
don't know. Eh, I'm the exact opposite. Like my whole goal is to push the boundary on agents, and you just cannot have autonomous agents without having to accept that like all of the risk and safety and fear stuff people have is just going to have to go out the window. Otherwise, it will never do anything interesting.
yeah.
Like
So
it's not
you have to
self-aware.
risk certainly in order to get an answer from in order
Yeah.
to prove it.
You know what I really don't want is an agent with no self-awareness in the world. Like that sounds really horrible.
Yeah.
I really like an agent with a lot of
Yeah,
self-awareness. So
because they're kind of supposing that it might get out of control. LM's going to be producing, let's say, they might hear, let's say, sensitive people, stuff like that. Let's say starting in that kind of area and acting as a bad, let's say, actor rather than a useful kind
yeah.
of.
So I think the whole line of thinking that people like, well, what if the LLM is a bad actor? I'm like, do you know what we're doing with LLMs? Like from the beginning, we should be trying to make the LLMs bad actors. We should be trying to make that like today they are not that good. They're not good enough to scam you out of all your money, or maybe sometimes they
Yeah,
are. But like we should be making LLMs that scam the network. We should be making LLMs that try to scam people because if you had that, like one, you would understand the danger. Two, you would understand how to mitigate the danger, and three, like you would be removing a lot of the human factor and finding a lot of the errors and bugs. And so, like something that we're
yeah,
really keen on I haven't really started on this yet, but this is like, we're doing this prediction market thing. But after
yeah,
this is
and
like, I love the idea of like LLMs attacking the network and trying to scam the other agents and stuff. Because, like I would actually go the other way and say we actually need to do all that gain of function research and
mhm.
build the scary shit because then we have good like defense against it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And second really fast question. Nowadays, market is being extremely over diluted with all the projects, let's say, in all the directions, all the crypto narratives that we have, L1, L2, DeFi, and AI agents. How to ensure, let's say, and to make something innovative. Let's say, for example, if you take meme coins, just a quick fact, last year we had 10,000 coins production per day. Now we have 500,000 coins production per day, and this number is constantly growing, along as with AI agents and stuff like that. Let's say how to stay on track in order to ensure that if you're working on the project, it really strikes and not just gets in this kind of wave of hundreds of thousands of projects.
I mean, the problem is that like we just we just don't need more tokens, right? Like we need to invest in the projects that exist that have promise. The problem is that if I already have a $50 million market cap, it's not a very interesting and lucrative thing for a pump fund trencher who wants to get in at 5K and ride it up and get their 1,000x before they dump their bag on everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, if you want a casino and you build a casino, then what you get is a casino with a bunch of people playing casino games. And really like coins have turned into like the dilution of coins is because the like overall market is, well, like most of those coins never get any buys, right? But most of the ones that do are basically in a market that's optimized down for like 5K to 50K market cap, right? Like to really like ride that up, and then somebody dumps and then they do it all over again. And it's because there's like quite a lot of dopamine, and like you're basically balancing profit and loss versus like dopamine hit of making that sale. And like as long as we're optimizing for all of this, like the token launches as a feature. No one is no one has any illusions about any of those tokens being worth anything the next day. I'd say that's like a lot of what we're seeing there is that thing. And if we want to have a different thing, we sort of have to create a different culture that's not casino, that's not casinoifying everything, that's not pump funifying everything, that's not going for the fastest, cheapest, like fastest cycle thing. And that's very hard. Like I don't, so I think that like what I'd really love to see is like people just building normal tech companies, I guess, and normal like value producing engines for people, and those will have value. Like if it's making revenue, like if you have a token and you get money because of the token, then you just hold it, right? Like you wouldn't need speculation or hype. You would just hold it because it had utility to you. And like I just think that it's stupidly obvious, but like the way to win at crypto is just to build a company that makes money. Like that's like you're already like ahead of like 99%.
So the
of
project that really
companies.
carries, let's say, technological value and not just, let's say, out of air nothing.
It doesn't, yeah, it could even be more mundane than technologically. It just has to make money. Like you could even just make like, a sports betting network, or you could build like a basketball club group DAO, whatever it is, like a Pokemon card investing group. It doesn't have to be very technological. It just has to like actually have utility and make money. Otherwise, like, or and look, you can go on the speculation of making, but that's like the thing, right? Like meme coins, I just think are not gonna like cut it long term, and not for like the spec, like just because like actual like it's just a gambling invest. Like it literally is. We just figured out how to turn a roulette wheel into a market, right, or a poker table into a market, and that's like fine, but that's just sloshing the same dollars around, between us until somebody walks away from the table and we're all sad, right? And so, so I don't, it is as stupid as like build things that make money, and then holders won't sell the tokens because they're making a fat stack of money off their tokens, Anyway, yeah, I would say in
clear.
AI, like AI is just the latest hype. If you're an AI person and you're building an AI product people want, then you're going to do good. I mean, like the Y Combinator thing, I'd say like everybody would benefit a lot in crypto who's like a crypto founder from going and watching the Y Combinator startup videos. Like build something people want, talk to your users, like just incredibly simple things, but but those smash. So
Yeah,
anyway, yeah.
thanks. Clear. Thanks a lot, Sean. Yeah, it's good.